they asked the court to declare the guidance in the new December manual, as well as this new rule, invalid under the Michigan Constitution. Okay, Jocelyn is trying it again. And now, after extensive briefing by the competing parties, we had oral arguments, and here's what the court has decided. The defense wants this court, that's Jocelyn, to dismiss this, and the challengers want summary judgment. But here's what the courts say. First of all, there is standing. Now, although this action was violated by a constellation of plaintiffs, the standing issue appears to involve no factual dispute at all, so the court can resolve this based on the existing record. Now, one of the plaintiffs, Cindy, serves as the town clerk, and so she needs a ruling in the form of a declaratory judgment. So she has standing, and they didn't challenge her standing, so we're here. We can decide this case. Now, let's talk about the actual manual. The guidance manual issued by Jocelyn Benson in December of last year, to try to rig 24, to, quote, assist clerks in dealing with signature verification, voter notification, and signature cure, states, okay, Jocelyn's trying it again. So insane. She just got told, don't do this. She just put it in her manual. Voter signatures are entitled to an initial presumption of validity, okay? So they just added it. It's not to a presumption of validity. It's an initial presumption of validity. They're such scammers. Jocelyn, we know what you're doing, cheater. You just can't add a word in there and solve the whole thing. The plaintiffs contend that an initial presumption of validity is also impermissible, and the court agrees. Golly. Under the Constitution, election officials, they say, shall verify the identity of a voter who applies for an absent voter ballot other than by in-person and by comparing the voter's signature with the record. You shall. You must do that. And you must verify. It doesn't say presumed it's okay. And must verify the identity of a voter who votes an absent ballot by comparing the signature against the record. And so thus our Constitution calls for a comparison. You have to compare it. You cannot just make a presumption for or against validity. Jocelyn, you actually have to look at the signatures. Okay, when people were saying in 2020 they weren't checking signatures, this is why. Because they weren't. Because Michigan, Jocelyn, were saying there was a presumption that they were valid, so you didn't even have to check. That was in violation of the Michigan Constitution. Constitution says you shall verify it. Our Constitution calls for it. The language in the Michigan statute also precludes the application of a presumption of validity. It says you must review. You shall. The city court shall review each absent voter ballot return envelope. And by verifying, you must verify the signature in accordance with the law. It makes no mention of a presumption of validity. That's what Jocelyn wants, so all the fake ballots can come through. They don't have to check them at all. Here's what else Michigan law says. An elector's signature is invalid only if it differs in significant and obvious respects. Slight dissimilarities must be resolved in favor of them. Exact signature matches are not required. It just has to agree sufficiently. Now, those three sentences, which do not prescribe or even suggest a presumption of validity, no. They provide election officials with directives they must follow in verifying the signatures on the absentee ballot and the applications and envelopes. You don't get to just decide that they're fine. In response to the challenger's reliance on this pellucid statutory language. So, in response to the plaintiff's reliance upon the pellucid statutory language, which is obviously clear as hell, the defendants take the position that the guidance manual does not prescribe a presumption. No, instead it calls for a more modest initial presumption. With apologies to Gertrude Stein, says the judge, however, a presumption is a presumption is a presumption. Whether the guidance manual includes a gentle nudge instead of a hip check, okay, whether it's a love tap or a right cross, it's still foul under Michigan law. Jocelyn, you cheater. Initial. Preliminary. She'll come back, she'll call it a preliminary initial presumption. She'll call it a PIP. But she's preliminary. Indeed, the defendant's decision to initially assert but then to later withdraw the presumption language speaks volumes about their understanding of Michigan law. So we know you tried to put it in and then put it out and will not allow it. So accordingly, the court shall award a declaratory judgment describing as impermissible all presumption language, Jocelyn, contained in the guidance manual for dealing with absentee ballots. You don't just get to make up whatever you want. Now, they also concede that some of these other rules, the plaintiffs, the challengers, but they nonetheless assert some of these rules are valid, but some are not. Now, based on the court's analysis, the portion of the catch-all line in Rule 2 also must be excised, so delete that from your rule, Jocelyn. The excision of that language from the catch line will not have any appreciable effect because it's not part of the statute itself, so take it out of the rules. Rather, the catch line is inserted for the purpose of convenience convenience, like chapter titles, but it's not in the chapter, so get it out of the title. The principle presumably applies with equal force to the rules. Now, the more difficult question concerns the validity of Rule 4, which is talking about the explanation for the differences in the signatures. So can you say that they match? You actually have to compare. Okay, you can't just say there's a presumption. But now, okay, we're comparing. Now can we decide that they match? Here are some 5 possible explanations where the election riggers can say, oh yeah, it matches totally, yeah, and shove it through. So they'll say, 1, evidence of trembling or shaking in the signature, because you're getting old, health-related, getting old. The voter may have used a diminutive of their full legal name. So if I write like Rob, but not Robert, or R Gouveia instead of Robert Gouveia, maybe that's good enough. The voter's signature style may have changed slightly over time. The signature may have been written in haste. The surface of the location may have been rough, even, or unstable. And that all sounds fine, right? Like, yeah, sure, our signatures are not exactly the same every time. But in separate language that is permissive, this other rule explains that other officials may also consider factors applicable to a particular voter. So now they can just look at the individual, not just the signature. Like the voter age, the age of the signatures. So how old is this person and when is the record? Like, is their signature record 5 years ago? Is it 25 years ago? The possibility the voter is disabled, their primary language, the quality of the digitized signature, and so on. Now, the court disagrees. They say, well, that sounds like you have that power. The Secretary of State possesses powers and duties about these procedures, and those rules are allowed. A signature is only invalid if it's inspected and slight dissimilarities seems like it's in alignment with those rules. So those rules are valid. Now, without question, it says, let's be generous to the voters. Allow for disqualification only if it's like clear. Slight dissimilarity should be resolved in favor of the voter. And so the judge says, we'll allow those rules to continue to be in place. But for all the reasons set forth, the court declares that Jocelyn's second attempt at initial presumption of validity of signatures is incompatible with the Constitution of Michigan. The court declares that the catch line, initial presumption of validity, which they tried to shoehorn in there, is also incompatible. Now, other things are compatible. You can consider reasons why they might match, even if they look like they might not. The court invites further proposed judgments here soon. Signed by Christopher P. Yates, Court of Claims from Michigan. And so Jocelyn Benson loses big time on that. You can tell this was pretty significant for them because of how hard they were trying to just even get the language in. If they could just even have it a part of the rules, then the people at the polling places would say, oh, no, but it says right here in the rules. It's not in the rule, but it says in the title, so I guess maybe we can presume they're valid. Then they changed it. They want the presumption so badly that they just changed it to call it an initial presumption to see if they could squeeze that through.Maybe they'll try preliminary initial presumption sometimes on Tuesdays. Maybe that one will fly through. Keep trying, Jocelyn. They're cheaters. They're liars. They're trying to rig 2024 just like they did in 2020, which is what they did in Michigan. So here's Jocelyn. She is out now. This was just a little campaign update from her. This is what Jocelyn's working on in Michigan. We're going to see what she sounds like as she unveils her new mobile secretary office.
Starting today, the Secretary of State Resources and Services will become a little more accessible. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson joined various community leaders and officials on the steps of the Marquette District Court to celebrate the launch of the newest Secretary of State mobile office. With Michigan's Upper Peninsula being such an expansive region, the Secretary of State says having this resource will mean citizens who have difficulty getting to the nearest Secretary of State office will be able to access important resources much more easily.
As Secretary of State, it's been really important to me to ensure someone who also has a home here in Marquette that we effectively serve everyone throughout the state, whether they're in Copper Harbor or all the way, or in Houghton, or all the way down in Hillsdale or Grand Rapids or Detroit. And so this dedicated mobile office will serve residents of the Upper Peninsula all throughout the year and make sure that anytime they need state services, they'll be able to access them conveniently and effectively. We anticipate visiting senior centers, veteran shelters, community events, and other gatherings, and anyone can request a mobile office to visit their event at michigan.gov/SOSmobile.
It sounds like she's creating a little mobile ballot harvesting DoorDash operation or something like that. Do you need us to come pick up some ballots from you? Perfect. We have a mobile Secretary of State office. We'll be happy to come up and pick. Where's your printer at? Oh, I mean, where's your residence at? Great. We'll see you soon. All right. So Judge Christopher Yates puts the halt on the multiple attempts to create a presumption of validity. That is a nice catchphrase for us to remember. Anytime they say, well, how was the election rigged? You say, oh, it was easy. There was an illegal rule change in Michigan where she adjusted the mechanism by which signatures are supposed to be matched. She just said that they're all presumptively valid. There was a presumption presumption of validity in her own rules, meaning they did not even check them. They just presumed their valid. And a court in Michigan has now confirmed that the attempt to do that again in 2024 is invalid. But none of that was addressed in 2020. Michigan was rigged, as we know. Now it's proven by a judge. So this is something we'll continue to cover. This election litigation is going to heat up here as 2024 emerges every single day closer and closer. And we're going to continue to cover it, my friends. So thank you for subscribing as we do. Would love it if you liked this video. And really...
No. With that being said, election tampering with is constantly happening against Donald Trump. From the first time that man became president, they've been after this dude. What the fuck we gonna do? It's a fucking shame. Don't make no fucking sense. But it is what it is. It's our fault. I'm just saying. I'm Mr. Glasses 48. I ain't finished with this mission. I'm just cutting it off because I got 15 minutes a piece to make a video.